We're live. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 642, the weekly show that's all about weather. Pre-show, magical time of the program where we do three things most frequently. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say very outrageous things.
Like, how come my Hangout Toolbox lower third doesn't work anymore, James?
I quit using it. I don't even know. I just quit doing it. I figure
You turn it on. You turn it on. It doesn't come on.
Well, let's see. Hangout Toolbox. Well, mine works. Does it not? No, it doesn't work.
No.
It says lower third. You click.
Clicks like it's turned on, but no, it doesn't appear.
Oh, well.
How can they mess something like that up? It worked for years.
Oh, it just happens.
So are any of your training buddies, James, making it big in the big leagues? Because I've been kind of out of baseball here for a year or two, and I haven't been following things. So, we seen any of your guys on the diamond?
They've not been called up yet this year. The two guys that work out with me, I say work out with me. They work out with me.
They come to James for training.
They're in the same building I'm in. Kendall Graveman. You ever heard of Kendall Graveman with the Oakland A's?
Yes, I've heard that name.
Is
he in AAA now or AA?
No, unless he got bumped down, he should be in Oakland.
Oh, he's in the big league. Ooh.
Yeah, he is with the Oakland A's, and he went to Mississippi State, played high school at Benjamin Russell High School in Alexander City, Alabama. He's kind of struggled this year.
He needs to come back for some of the span magic.
Yeah, really. I'm trying to see if he kind of had a rough start.
So do you have any baseball trips planned this summer, James?
Oh, wait. Well, breaking news. He was actually demoted to AAA April 26th. He was bumped down.
Uh-oh.
He started the season 0-5 with a 8.89 ERA, which is not good. So he is down at their AAA team now. Mitch Moreland is doing great for Boston. Mm-hmm. He's having a great year.
So they're number 2 in the power rankings, onto the Yankees. Order is restored to the universe.
That Mookie Betts is doing well. He's hitting home runs. Moreland's hitting home runs. I mean, they're. I think they've got more grand slams than anybody else in baseball.
Did you see the Braves are 7th now in the power rankings? They're coming back.
Yeah, they're like leading their division, aren't they?
Yeah, by 1 game, but they lost 3 in a row.
For those that don't know,
baseball brains for tonight.
Baseball brains. Thank you for watching. So Brian, my man, my anchor man here in the studio is a little worried about your event. He's afraid he's going to get flesh-eating bacteria from what you're doing to him.
Is he you gonna put him in the creek or what, Brian?
Oh yeah,
Brian is. He's putting him in the creek, Bill.
No.
He's making the anchor man get in this cesspool water.
No, it's not cesspool water.
It will be soon.
So why don't you get? If that's the case, then why don't you get in it?
That's right. You lick your finger, Brian.
Because I'm down at the stage announcing. That's why.
Oh, so you're making the anchor man get in the water to catch ducks while you're over there.
He's the celebrity guest wrangler.
You know, this flesh-eating bacteria is a real thing, though. It's kind of scary.
No,
but there hasn't been any in our creek, so.
Oh, that's good. There's always the first.
So you're saying they don't flush sewage in that creek?
I'm saying there is stuff coming out of the sewer treatment plant, but it's clean.
Clean effluent. We'll ask our guest about that tonight, Rudy. Hey, Rudy, welcome to the show. Rudy thought he tuned into the wrong Google Hangout there for a minute.
No, he's about to hang. He's about to hang. Our advice, Rudy, hang up and run as fast as you can.
Well,
Sewer systems are us.
If I be talking about effluent, I think I will hang up and run. I will say that.
Well, that affects the Mississippi River, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And only Brian's lower third works. There's a scandal there, James Band.
I just typed it in. I don't know what to think.
Maybe it's because ours is already put in there, James. Let's see.
I haven't even thought to do that.
Not that it's
the last
important
few
or
weeks.
anything.
Was that a yawn?
Yes, it's just this is not good when you're yawning on Monday.
This is the mid-May yawn. You need a nap till July, James.
It doesn't bode well.
Do you find the mid-spring yawn coming earlier and earlier every year?
Oh man. Oh goodness. Got the TV ratings going on, doing 2 schools a day.
So I have a very important question.
Go.
What's up with the LG appliances at your house?
Yeah, my wife's on the warpath against LG.
I could tell. Wow.
She's not a big fan. That they have been slightly unstable.
Oh dear.
But you know, it is what it is.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just like the dryer. You have to totally power it down, like unplug it and let it reset the CPU, and you plug it back up about every like 3 days, and that's.
So you played the song for?
It's not really convenient to do that. Yeah.
Sounds like it's a device on the internet.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again.
Yeah. There we go. And then the washer has had a problem with leakage.
Oh,
But
no.
that's okay. That's just the joys of life.
Yeah. Were these
No
new
washer
appliances when you moved in your new house, James?
No, we've had them for probably 6 or 7 years. I guess back in the old days when I was growing up, you just get a washer and dryer and they never stopped working. They just work forever, you know. And
Isn't that the truth?
now you just
My mother-in-law had one that was like a Maytag that was like 40 years old.
yeah, and those were the good old days.
The
back
good
in
old
the
days, yes, when they made appliances that were meant to stay with you for a while.
Didn't have any CPUs and washers and dryers.
You know, I still don't see any reason for my washer, dryer, or refrigerator to be on the internet. I'm sorry.
Well, you can turn it off from the station, Brian, while you're working. It'll be great.
Why would I want to do that?
You can start the lasagna before you get home.
I'm not that busy. Thank you.
So the question is, who has one of these speakers in your house from Google, Apple, or Amazon?
My 10-year-old does.
Oh,
He runs his entire
Not
room.
me,
He can make the lights green just by saying it.
I'm a little concerned about those things, so I don't have one.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're all Russian operatives. I mean, come on.
I don't need.
I just got back from the Flat Earth Conference.
Was it a good one?
Yeah, it was really good. Our numbers are increasing.
Well, I saw where there's a statistic that like 34% of millennials believe the Earth is flat.
I couldn't even finish reading the article.
Don't think that's true, huh?
No, I know it's probably true. It's just the whole thing
If
is
it's
going
true,
to.
it's scary.
What is one of my associates? The world is going to hell in a breadbasket. That's what she always says.
Show title, ladies and gentlemen. Rudy is about ready to take off and run. I could tell. He's thinking, what in the world have I gotten myself into here?
It's gonna be our second Rudy's Rampage of the week.
We have to wait until the bottom of the hour until we start this. We're simulcasting this on local television, so this is called the pre-show, and this is not
also
part of the
need-
audio.
You also
That's when we
need to
clean
let
up our act.
You need to let our
This is
email
not
bag
part of-
officer have her say before she has to go.
Yeah, Aubrey hung up on us last week.
We can hear the speaker, but we can't hear Aubrey. Is she whispering to us?
No, I'm here. I'm here. How about now?
That was somebody else's speaker.
No, we had a bunch of people coming in here, and I got called out to do some stuff in the newsroom. We're doing some video and things like that. So it was crazy.
You're kind of a big deal. I mean,
oh please, I am no big deal compared to James Spann.
No, you are
we
a
beg to
big
differ.
gold deal.
Hey Bill, question: what time
yes,
does
ma'am.
Weatherfest start at NWA?
At 9:30, but load in starts at 8. Yes.
Okay.
And it goes until 5, and load out goes till 5:30. It's getting to be huge. I mean, it is.
I know it's such a big deal. Well,
it really is. I hope you'll be there, Aubrey.
Well, I was not going to be able to go because we already have 2 people off that day. But I think I just noticed in the calendar that someone scratched off their day. So if that's the case, then I might be able to. But I need to map it out and see.
I hope you can get there on Friday night, James Spann. I know that'll be a little hard to do, but
we'll see what we can do here.
It's going to be a really big deal, kind of like our movie, Anchorman.
Oh,
all right. So welcome to our television viewers. 30 minutes after the hour, and we are about to start this shoe here. So let's jump right into it. I mean, we can just kind of do it here. So here we go. Recorder track number 1, track number 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains episode number 642. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for May 7th, 2018. Past the May Day, and we're getting awfully close to the old dog days of summer. Brian Peters, do you love summer? Are you a summer man?
Somewhat. I don't like those, 100-degree days with humidities around 80%. I don't mind the warmth. Like the days we're having, the first 80 days, the 80-degree days, those have been kind of nice.
Yep. Yeah. No, look, when I was a kid, I loved it. Now as an old man, I'm a winter guy. I am a winter guy all the way. My heart is crushed that the cool days are over and we're almost here. But I bet you Aubrey loves summer. Aubrey looks like a summer lady.
I like summer, but I don't like the humidity. So
it seems to be a common complaint.
Yeah. But you know what? We're pretty lucky here with the mountains. The Blue Ridge Mountains, if they do anything, they block all of that moisture from the Atlantic. So yay, score. So it's actually not as bad here as you've all been to like DC and stuff. It's not nearly as bad. And
I bet you have summer days with dew points in the 40s there, don't you?
50s. Okay. Thank you. but over 60, over 68 is pretty untypical for us.
Just give me October and May. I'll take October and May.
It was nice.
I worked a number of days in July and August with dew points that touch 80 here.
Yeah,
just brutal.
I spent some time in Louisiana after Katrina. Let me tell you, nothing says sticky like Louisiana in September, October. Oh my, that was.
I was just down the street in Katrina over at Gulf Shores, and it was brutal, the humidity after Katrina came ashore.
Yeah,
wow.
It was pretty bad.
Do you remember sleeping with all the doors open in that hotel that night, Brian, after the hurricane came ashore? Because there was no power, of course, no air conditioning, and we just had to leave the doors open. It was the only way you could get halfway cool.
And that's when you really know what true darkness is, when all the power is out.
As far as you can see.
For as far as you can see.
Rick Smith, what's the highest dew point you've ever noticed or you can remember in Oklahoma City?
Oh,
85.
gosh. It felt like 85, but I don't know. Probably mid 70s. I'll never forget back when I used to be able to storm chasing over in eastern Oklahoma one day, and it was like the dew point was 76 or 77. I think it was just horrible. I don't mind. Brian, like you said, Gulf Shores is about the only place I can take that kind of humidity as long as you're on the beach.
Yeah.
And
because you've got on an old bathing suit and nothing else.
Just you got to be in the right situation. But no, we were close to 90 here today. So it definitely feels like summer.
Yeah, the 90s are just around the corner for the southeastern U.S., I think.
So, Rick, you did have your first tornado of the season.
We did, either on the first or the second. We're still investigating. We definitely had tornadoes on the second, though. We had a tornado here in Norman. Actually, it was a QLCS tornado, which we do get here, contrary to popular belief, an 8-mile track in EF1. So kind of a relatively longer track for that type of tornado. And we had some legit supercell tornadoes out in western Oklahoma before it got to central Oklahoma and kind of became QLCS dominant.
And the word I have is that you all put out an excellent warning for that QLCS tornado.
I'm very proud of our office for this event. We don't, we deal with these quite often. I think we're getting better at dealing with them. We're not going to catch them all, but we nailed a few of these. I mean, we had 40 minutes lead time, I think, for Norman.
Whoa.
I mean, there was
I hadn't heard it was that high, but congratulations.
Yeah, so awesome. I don't want to say don't get used to it, but that was an exceptional performance. We're getting better. We're applying some science to it and trying to really stay on top of that, and worked really well with the media. Had some really good successes for this event. We're very proud of it.
Yeah, the QLCS tornadoes are just a nightmare down here. I mean, if you get 2 minutes lead time, you're lucky sometimes. But yeah. Bill Murray, let's bring in our guest before he runs and hangs up.
Well, if he hasn't hung up the first 20 minutes, we're probably good. And Brian, you're welcome. Scott Martin got Rudy's picture to you and the bio. So hats off to Scott, who handled this entire setup of this interview. Rudy, it's so nice to finally meet you.
Thank y'all for having me. Scott found the best looking picture on the internet of me he could find, and that's the best I can do, guys. Sorry.
Well, we'll take it. But you're the manager of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority's engineering division there in Louisiana. Tell us about the CPRA for a minute, Rudy.
Correct. So after you're talking about Katrina a little while ago, after Katrina, one of the things we realized in our state was we had an agency that was in charge of flood protection, and we had a whole different agency in charge of coastal restoration. In Southeast Louisiana, both run hand in hand. Actually, in South Louisiana, both run hand in hand. So our legislature made a wise decision to take both of those agencies, both of those things that these agencies work on, and combine them into a single agency. So the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority was found. So what was happening was, you'd have folks going to D.C. asking for money for levees and flood protection features, and then you'd have right behind them another group of totally different people asking for money for coastal restoration, dredging, and ecosystem services, both singing different songs. It made sense that both of those things be combined into a single entity. So since the 2007 timeframe, CPRA has been the single entity for all things coastal in Louisiana. So if it involves levee protection or structural protection like you see around the city of New Orleans, our agency, in partnership with agencies like the Corps, implement those projects. If it involves ecosystem restoration, Barrow Island restoration, dredging, rebuilding of wetlands, our agency also does that. So we've been quite busy since the 07 timeframe. In the past decade or so, we've implemented projects benefiting upwards of about 40,000 acres of lost wetlands. Thanks to natural disasters like Katrina, we're able to shed a lot more light on our coastal crisis here in Louisiana, and honestly, thanks to the BP oil spill, we were able to receive some settlement dollars that allowed us to put some projects on the ground even faster. Although that definitely was a disaster in itself, we from a program standpoint, we were able to do some things that we may not have been able to do otherwise. So we've been quite busy over the past over the past decade or so, and we continue to ramp up here.
So Rudy, you may not be an expert in this area, but the BP, the BP spill was a disaster for the whole Gulf Coast. What do you think the effects of having, I guess, hundreds of millions or billions of gallons of dispersant entered into the Gulf? Is that going to have any long-term lasting effect on marine life and the health of the Gulf?
There's been universities and several others have done some studies on that, and there appears to be some validity to that statement. Like you said, I'm not an expert there, but I know that they were putting a whole lot of chemicals in the waterways. I know in Alabama and other states as well. So I'd be interested to see where that goes. I know that in terms of oil there still are parts of our coast where we see a lot of tar balls. We still have a lot of patches of marsh islands that are dying off from still signs of oil contaminants. So I know the damage from the oil is still kind of left behind to some degree. I imagine a lot of the other things put in place to help mitigate that oil damage may have been left behind as well.
So we hear the constant statistics that scare us senseless about the erosion of the coastline in Louisiana. Do you see any signs of that turning around, Rudy, because of all the different efforts that have been going on the past 10, 12 years?
Localized, yes. And you look at certain very specific areas. I do think we've put some good projects on the ground. I guess our program over the past decade has taken a very local approach, and just like any other state, we try to restore as many different towns and parishes as we can. So we've kind of stretched our dollars from Texas all the way to the Mississippi border. One of the things we shift our focus on when we look to our most recent master plan, our coastal master plan, which was released in 2017, was to figure out ways that we can take advantage of synergies amongst projects and kind of put some regional restoration on the ground. And that's where these sediment diversion projects come into play. The Mississippi River literally built our coast. It swept back and forth over the past 7,000 years or so and built everything that we sit here on in South Louisiana. Unfortunately, and for the right reasons, after the flood of 1927, the lower Mississippi River was largely leveed, which was a good thing for cities like New Orleans and even Baton Rouge, and for navigation and for a lot of the infrastructure that had been built along the Mississippi River up to that time. However, one thing that happened there is what built Louisiana, the sediment nutrients from over 40% of the Mississippi River watershed was cut off. So since that time frame, since the 1930s, we've lost 2,000 square miles of land here in Louisiana, most of which has been lost in southeast Louisiana near the Mississippi River Delta. So one of the things it's not a new concept, it's been talked about for decades, is to figure out a way to reconnect the river to the wetlands of southeast Louisiana. It sounds very simple. We want to just cut the levees in very strategic locations and let Mother Nature take over. So we've been looking at that for probably the past 20 or 30 years. And we've recently, in the past 5 years, we've focused in on a set of very advanced computer models. We've looked at it from a standpoint of a performance of projects over the past 10 or 20 years. And we now is the time. So we actually have funding in place to do it, and we have some momentum. So we're actually trying to design 2 of these projects as we speak, one on the east bank of the river, one on west bank of the river, to reconnect the Mississippi River to the wetlands. Like I said, most of the projects we've built over the past decade or so have been in the form of projects that take advantage of hydraulically dredged sediment. So we're looking at barrier islands. You see a lot of barrier islands in Mississippi and Alabama and other places, Florida particularly. Louisiana does have sandy barrier islands. We've rebuilt pretty much the vast majority of those. We've also built interior wetlands with dredge material. Unfortunately, for those projects have been highly successful, but like the rest of Louisiana, the new projects we've built are very much susceptible to relative sea level rise. We in our estimations, these projects only stay on the landscape for about 20 years before they sink and sea levels catch up with them and they disappear, just like the rest of our wetlands have done. So we realize now that we have to take a step back and realize, how do we sustain our coast? We can build our coast. We can put mud on the ground and build it. However, with some of the sea level rise predictions that are coming out here, and our coast is a sinking coast. So we refer to it as relative sea level rise, which means the water's coming up and the bottom's going down. So we're being hit from both directions there. And some of these dredge projects just aren't lasting very long. So we realized, going back to what got us here in the first place, using the Mississippi River to build our land is a direction that we're going here. So these 2 first projects, these are mega projects, some of the largest of their kind, are strategically placed locations within the Mississippi River, south of New Orleans, where we're going to breach the levee and we're going to put a gated structure and allow water and sediment to flow from the river back into the wetlands.
So how did you pick those locations? Are they relatively uninhabited, or did you have to displace people in the process in some cases?
They are inhabited. Actually, one of them is right next to one of the largest gasoline oil refineries in our state. So we're in very busy parts of the state along Lower Plaquemines Parish here. We picked those locations. First, we looked at the river. What can the river give us? The river, just as any river, it meanders. And as it meanders, it forms bars along the inside bend of that meander. Those bars typically are a healthy source of sand. And that's what we want to get. We want to take the sand off the bottom of the river. We want to mobilize it, and we want to push it through a channel. There's sand in the water column flowing when the river's in flood stage. However, if you can strategically locate one of these projects on that bar, on that sand bar, you get that much more sand. So we call it a sediment to water ratio. That's the concentration of sand in the water that we're going to push through our channel. When we put it on one of those sandbars, that's the best location. So we look at the river, we look at where the sandbars are. That's what the river gives us. Then we look at the basin side or the marsh side and see what that gives us. Unfortunately, a lot of parts of South Louisiana have sunk so deep or have subsided so much that they're literally part of the Gulf of Mexico. It will be difficult to build land in those areas. So what we want to look for is perhaps shallower areas that are more contained or more confined and more inland, and start building those first. We could look at the potential of going further south in the river, but when you get into those areas, the basin side opportunities are limited just because the water's deeper, the wave environment's higher, and the land building isn't as conducive as the shallow water areas. So we look at that as well. And then, of course, you also have to look into factors of infrastructure. Obviously, we don't want the channel going through a oil refinery. That's very costly and probably not in our best interest. Also, we even look at homes. On the East Bank, there is a project that is near homes. So we did our best to find a spot where the river's still going to build land. We can put a channel, but we're not impacting anybody's home. So our goal is not to displace anybody. We will acquire private property. Most of it's pasture lands or wooded. That's our goal. We're going to have to accommodate a highway. We have a 4-lane highway on the West Bank. We have a 2-lane highway on the East Bank. So a bridge will have to go over the channel. We have railroad infrastructure, as well as anything else that comes with a major highway. Natural gas infrastructure, telephone, internet, all of the infrastructure that goes along with that will have to be relocated as well. In addition, we're cutting through what's known as forced drainage areas. So these are areas that are most of Plaquemines Parish is a forced drainage area, which means it all kind of flows to an area that's pumped. We cut one of those polders right in half, so we have to facilitate that as well. So there's a lot of things in play there. Although we're not directly relocating people's homes, it is a very much active part of the state that we have to accommodate.
Now, I stood on that Morganza control structure, and that's an amazing facility, especially when the river's in flood. Talk about when it was put there, why it was there, and is some of its process to allow some diversion into the Atchafalaya Basin?
You're talking about Old River, I think. Yeah. So the Old River structure, if you want a good book to read, if you like reading very highly technical books, there's a book called Designing the Bayous. If you're interested in the history of the Mississippi River and its kind of relationship with the Atchafalaya, I highly recommended. But the story goes is the Mississippi River is smart. Water is smart. It's always trying to find the most efficient pathway to a larger body of water like the Gulf of Mexico. And that's exactly what the Mississippi River did over the past 7,000 years. It swept back and forth, east and west along our coast, always finding that more efficient route. The current most efficient route for the Mississippi River to get to where it's going is the Atchafalaya River. It's a shorter path and it's a steeper slope. And that provides the Mississippi River a more ease to get to the Gulf of Mexico. And if you're not familiar with the Atchafalaya, it's located probably depending on where you're at, 70 to 100 miles west of the Mississippi River. So in the 60s, the Corps built a structure north of Baton Rouge to keep the Mississippi River from switching paths, basically controlling Mother Nature, if you will. Mother Nature almost won not long after that structure was built, and the structure almost failed in the 70s when they had a great flood then. The Corps ultimately built several more structures to fortify that and have been successful ever since. The newest structure, auxiliary structure, which I think was commissioned in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, is very similar to the types of structures we'll build for our project. It's a large, what's known as a Tainer gate structure, which is giant arch gates that open upward. And it has what's known as a low sill, which means it's deep in the water column to capture water and sediment. So it's very similar. We've actually visited that structure several times to use as an example of the structure we may be designing for our projects. But yeah, it's an interesting story. The Corps fought a battle they almost lost in the 70s and ultimately fortified that suite of structures there at Old River. It's a free tour. If you haven't already, I highly recommend anybody in the area visit it. There's not a whole lot around that part of Louisiana, unless you're going up to maybe Natchez, Mississippi or something like that. But yeah, it's a great tour. And if you're interested in water and hydraulics and big concrete things, it's definitely not a bad stop. So.
But you get some good food there in New Roads. Go over the Mississippi River ferry to St. Francis.
Oh yeah,
that's not a bad. But that if that had failed, I mean, literally, what would the impact have been on New Orleans and Baton Rouge and the rest of the river's navigation?
That's a good question. I guess the question would become, would it have been possible to redirect it back down to Mississippi?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think the answer to that's no. And ultimately, you would not have a port of New Orleans. You would not have drinking water in a lot of Southeast Louisiana. You would have Baton Rouge gets its water from aquifers, groundwater. But without the Mississippi, you could have threatened saltwater intrusion, also invading upward and threatening those aquifers as well. So not just on navigation or commerce, but big economic impacts on people's way of life in Southeast Louisiana. Also, communities like Morgan City, which are on the southern part of the Atchafalaya, probably would have flooded. A lot of those areas in and around the Atchafalaya Basin probably would have flooded had that river switched course.
Yeah, that I can't even imagine that happening.
It's a pretty interesting story if you're into hydraulics and river engineering to hear that tale, because it's definitely fighting Mother Nature in one situation where Mother Nature almost won in the 70s there.
So does it help with flooding south of the structure if a lot of water is being diverted through it in a big flooding situation, or is it a drop in the bucket?
There's actually a congressional mandate to not allow more than 70%. Basically, it's a 70-30 split. Only 30% of the water is allowed to flow through Old River towards the Atchafalaya. So,
is that to protect the downstream communities, or to?
It's a combination of protecting the flooding in the Atchafalaya Basin, but also maintaining a certain amount of water in the Atchafalaya Basin, just to keep that because it is a very much ecological system. A lot of cypress swamps, a lot of fisheries activity there. So it's a combination of letting enough water in there to kind of protect the ecosystem, but also not too much water to flood them.
My wonderful ice cream dessert has arrived now, so we can finish the rest of the interview. Thank you, darling. So, well, if you see me take a bite or two, it'll be because my ice cream's melting, Ruby. So, I stood on that structure and just was amazed at the power that you could feel coursing through it on some spring day back in the late 1990s. It just was an amazing experience, and like you say, I do recommend that anybody do that. So the river can't meander very much anymore because it's levied in, pretty much, isn't it?
Correct. It's I guess technically not allowed to go where it wants to go, which is a good thing for the communities around it. I think much of Southeast Louisiana would not be here had those levees not been built. But when you get down into the far southeastern part of the state, it is suffering from a land loss crisis, mainly due to the fact that there is a lack of sediment. That sediment that built those wetlands kind of got cut off. That's some of the newest land in the country, Lower Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana. So it is rapidly sinking from subsidence because it's unconsolidated soils, as well as the rising seas that the rest of the country is seeing. So it's not a pretty picture when you get into Plaquemines Parish, and you can go to Google Earth or any other satellite imagery and literally see that without running a computer model. That place is disappearing pretty quickly. We've done some pretty good localized projects of building back land with dredges, but we feel that the key to Plaquemines Parish, and it's a unique opportunity in our state because our coastal problems just aren't in Southeast Louisiana. They go all the way to the Texas border. we have a unique opportunity here in Southeast Louisiana to take advantage of the river and put it back to work.
Now we're coming up on I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. I was going to ask. This is Brian Peters. I was just curious. You keep mentioning that it's sinking and the sea level is rising. Which is the biggest right now? The bigger problem of the two?
I think in that's a great question that I'd have to probably put some thoughts in, because I think it depends on where you're at. I think areas in the Delta are sinking faster. But I think when you look at the 50-year prediction, the sea level rise continues to increase at a rapid rate. So I think that'll probably be more prevalent over time. I think for the most part, it's probably subsidence depending on where you're at, but it could be sea level rise in other parts of the state as well.
Is there one primary cause to the land sinking?
I think the main reason it's sinking is, once again, like I said, it's some of the newest land in our country. This is Lower Plaquemines, the Plaquemines subdelta, which was kind of the latest path of the Mississippi River, is only about 500 or 600 years old. So in geologic time frame, that's not very old, right?
Sounds pretty old to me, but in geologic time, it's not.
Do you remember in your childhood when that wasn't there, Brian Peters?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think I was working with Moses to forecast the.
But I mean, we're up against a whole lot of other factors down in Southeast Louisiana. We have a whole lot of man-made canals for navigation, oil and gas, that have allowed waters of higher salinity to creep into places that there shouldn't be, which kind of cause a lot of grass die off, which ultimately cause a lot of sinking land. And of course, hurricanes. At the end of the day, when you look at the paths of Katrina and other storms, even a storm like Rita, just given the location of Southeast Louisiana, still pushes up a whole lot of water in our coast. Yeah. So, and then oil and gas extraction, geologic faults. When you look at all of the things that go into it, there's a long list of reasons why Louisiana is disappearing, and not enough of them are why it's coming back. So that's why we're trying to put some of these projects on the ground and get them going.
Yeah, and I was curious too about the project you were talking about getting some of the sediment back. What kind of time frame is this whole project likely to take? Because you talked about relocating perhaps some homes or something, and then relocating some traffic issues and utilities and all. About what kind of time frame are we talking about for that whole project?
Yeah. So it'd be our goal not to relocate any homes. That's what we want to avoid. Yeah. But there are some highways and railroads that we definitely have to look into relocation. So as you can see, it's a mega project. The Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project, which is one in the West Bank, which is approaching the 15% design, is about $1 billion project. So as you can see, it's got quite a price tag on it with a lot of different features. Our goal right now is to have that thing flowing water and sediment in the middle of the 2020 decades. We're saying 2025, 2026 time frame is our ideal. So you see, we're still several years out from getting it permitted, getting it designed, and getting it constructed. We may see 4 or 5 years of construction on a project like this.
Yeah. Actually, I'm kind of amazed at your estimate, because I would have thought it might even be a little bit longer. I mean, it sounds like you say, a mega undertaking.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of momentum, and we've actually, from the permitting and regulatory standpoint, we've definitely coordinated well with the federal agencies. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on the project all the way up to the White House level. So we were able to take advantage of that and hopefully push a permit through pretty quickly. So I think ideally we could see this thing flowing water and sediment in 2026, something like that, towards the back end of the 2020 decade there.
Thank you.
So Interior Secretary Ryan Sinke was down, and he seems to be at least concerned about the plight of Louisiana. It seems like there were some good positive results that came out of those meetings. Rudy.
Correct. And I think it's a good transition, because I think when the secretary was there, we took him visit our river model, which I think is
that's the whole point of us having you on the show. We haven't even gotten to it. But Scott Martin's going, what the heck?
I can speak for another hour just on sediment diversions, because I wear 2 hats. I'm actually the project manager, or one of the project managers for the sediment diversions, but I'm also the project manager for the model, which you can't talk about the model without talking about sediment diversions, because that's what the model was built for. So like I mentioned before, we did a lot of numerical computer modeling to look at and study and analyze and plan. and even to some degree design our sediment diversions. But what do we want to do is take a step back and look at it from a physical model standpoint. And the beauty of a physical model is that if you take an object and you scale it to whatever scale you want, and you operate it or you run it at the same parameters that Mother Nature gives you, it's difficult to question the results. Most major civil works hydraulics projects have a physical model associated with them. A great example of that is the Panama Canal expansion. Major physical model was put into place. A lot of construction contractors really only trust the physical model. They want to see the object they're building reduced in size and run to the same parameters. So what we did is our object here is the lower 190 miles of the Mississippi River. We took the Mississippi River, we shrunk it, and we put it in a building. We carved in about 15 or 16 of these sediment diversion projects, more than we'll ever probably have the funds to build. But why not put them on it and take a look at them? What we're going to do is we're going to operate the river just as it flows. We're going to use real hydrographs. Right now, we're in a almost somewhat of a unique flood situation here in Louisiana. Our river's been in flood stage since late January. It's been in a major flood since late January. We've even had a Bonnie Carey spillway open in here a couple months ago. So this is a unique hydrograph for us in Louisiana to have a high river come up high and stay high. Usually, you see a river peak valley a few times. Since late January, the river's been up and it's stayed up. That's unique, So we can take these real hydrographs, this real data, and run this fake river, if you will, and then see what it gets us. And you can do a lot of the same analysis with computer models. There's no denying that. But what's beautiful about this model is you can physically see the results. We can run a year in about an hour, which is a great thing from a time perspective. And then what we'll do is we can run a huge domain and put many things online at the same time in a three-dimensional form and take a look at them. 2 or 3 of these sediment diversion projects with the Bonnie Carey spillway open and simulate dredging in Southwest Pass that the Corps does. These are all things that we can put in place that would take a whole lot of computing power to look at the same time from a numerical modeling standpoint. So it's a great tool from a planning perspective to look at 14,000 square miles of South Louisiana and analyze it in very short periods of time and get some really good results to help advance the sediment diversion program that we have.
So talk about the physical size of this model and where you house it and some of the logistics of it.
Yeah, so it's 90 by 120 feet. So it's about roughly the size of 2 basketball courts. Put that into perspective. We built a very large warehouse building that was very simple at first, and then we were able to identify some funding and made it very visitor friendly. So it's got a second-story observation deck on it, so you can kind of get a bird's eye view of the river model. What we do is it's here on what we call the water campus. So if you've been to downtown Baton Rouge, it's right south of downtown Baton Rouge. It's somewhat of a think tank of the topic of water, everything from coastal to drinking water issues to studying rivers and streams. So this water campus is going to be somewhat of an academic think tank or hub for all things related. Our agencies on this water campus. We also have LSU having some presence on the water campus, as well as an entity known as the Water Institute of Golf, which has been stood up to kind of serve as a private academic public partnership. So a lot going on this water campus, and we took this river model and put it right in the middle of it. So in addition to kind of the science side of what we're doing and using that model to advance our program, it also becomes a pretty unique visitor opportunity, particularly for someone like Secretary Ryan Zinke, who's not familiar with what's going on in Louisiana or may not have been familiar. We can take him, we can bring him to this river model, and we can show it to him at a scale that's second to none. So it ends up being a pretty unique opportunity. I think we've had over 600 students visit it since January when we cut the ribbon. So that's in about 5 months, we've had about 600 students, which is kind of our target audience. We want to kind of, in addition to all the other things going on, inspire that next generation of engineers and scientists that are going to be working in coastal Louisiana. The problem isn't for just my generation or even my kids' generation. It goes well beyond that.
So it acts as a fully functional museum. People can come and visit.
Correct.
Talk about the logistics of doing that. Can just anybody come anytime?
No, not at this time. What we've done is we've sent correspondence letters to every school in the state. and we want to kind of invite teachers and students, somewhat of a field trip. We've had a lot of college kids come in that are in engineering as well. But the visitor center basically it basically walks you through a very visual version of the story I told of CPRA, coastal Louisiana, Mississippi River, just in a very much more pictorial and visitor friendly version of that. So we kind of use that theme of the history of the Mississippi River, the land loss crisis, and then what we're doing about it. And that's what that whole exhibit is dedicated to. And then the centerpiece of the whole building, obviously, is the river model. So the river model is quite large, and it's basically painted with a swimming pool paint, so it's white. So another thing we did, if you saw some of the pictures of it, if you looked on our website, we put projectors on the ceiling so we could actually project maps down onto the model to give the visitors kind of a feel for where they're at or what they're looking at. But it also allows us to kind of digitize anything that the model can't speak to. So the model only speaks to one specific thing, which is sediment transport in the lower Mississippi River. But with these projectors, we can also communicate other things that are happening on our coast. Hurricane storm surge predictions, even model forecast of where hurricanes are going to go, sea level rise predictions, land loss predictions, all the things that you can put in a computer or PowerPoint, you can now project down onto this map. So it's an inverted PowerPoint screen, if you will. It's the same technology you might see in say a NBA pregame show where they project a lot of graphics and animations down on the court. We were able to take advantage of that and install that same system over the river model. So I'm more of the engineering on the geeky science side, so I've always been more in love with the model. But it's pretty hard not to be excited about that projection system, because the possibilities are literally endless. What we can communicate with them.
So are the banks of the river hard cut into the substance, and then you just flow the water and the sediment down, or does you have to go back and put the river back after it does what it wants to do?
I guess one of the things you mentioned with the levees is that the lower Mississippi River isn't changing. If you look at decadal surveys from the Corps, there hasn't been a whole lot of change in the lower part of the river because of those levees. So we basically carved in what exists today in terms of the levee. We actually made the channel a little bit deeper so it could build up a bed of sand. And then we start injecting the sand and we run it. We know it's kind of a calibration, but we kind of get it set up. And then once we get a good bed of sand flowing, then we start opening diversions and testing different scenarios. So you're absolutely right. We carved, it's a high density foam that the model's made of. We carved it with a CNC router, a computer router. We carve what exists today, and then we inject sediment and water into the river and run real hydrographs.
Well, it sounds like a huge science project. That
it is, and we have a great partnership with LSU. Dr. Clint Wilson was supposed to be here with me today. He's the professor over at LSU's Civil and Environmental Engineering Department that's going to kind of have the students running it. That's another great thing about it, is we have engineering students running it for us. So it's a second to none hands-on learning experience. Clint couldn't make it here tonight, but I think he is probably second to me in terms of who's the most excited and enthusiastic about the project. So if you'd have had us both on here, you may not have been able to contain us.
We'd have been going until 11:30 instead.
Yeah, it would have been a 90-minute segment. But at the end of the day, it's a great partnership with LSU, and I think in terms of students learning about the river and learning what we do and how to use the river for restoration, you can't compare it to anything. It's great.
Well, when we think Louisiana, we think hurricanes, and there've been some horrible ones. And I remember, you just had an earthquake off Grand Isle.
That's what they tell me. Yeah,
few nights. And I remember during Rita that we were forecasting for a facility in Houma, which was already on the edge after Katrina, and the manager called to say that some town south of Houma was on fire first. You had the hurricane coming with the storm surge and the big fire, and then there was an earthquake and a tsunami possibility. And I think that people in Southeast Louisiana thought the world was coming to an end at that point. So that's just a crazy situation. But do you think New Orleans is now, sort of ready for the next big hurricane if it comes, based on the new defenses that have been installed since Katrina?
There's some pretty impressive features that the Corps of Engineers has constructed to 100 level flood protection. They just recently completed some of the largest pump stations in the world to help pump out the stormwater once the whole system is closed up. Because that's the downside of a closed system. You close all your gates to stop the storm surge from coming in. However, the rain continues to fall, so you get the rain out. So they've recently just installed 3 of the largest pumps that we've ever built in our state. and completed that project. And there's pretty impressive levee systems, as well as there's a very big surge barrier on the east side of the city that they've constructed as well. I definitely think it's in much better shape than it ever has been in terms of that. But any of these storms, I mean, like I said, Katrina or anything like that, Category 4, Category 5, depending on where it hits and how long it stays there, I think any part of the state's at risk, including some of these parts of New Orleans.
So the MRGO, the Mississippi River Outlet, it was closed off, right? Rudy,
Correct.
after and it's gone now because it was a significant part of the contribution to the flooding in New Orleans.
The channel is still there, but there's a large rock dam that sits probably 2/3 between New Orleans and the Gulf of Mexico that they've closed it. So they've basically stopped that channelized water from coming up the channel. However, the surge barrier that I referenced is a little bit further back. The channel is one thing, and I think Mr. Go contributed by allowing a lot of salt water and other higher salinity flows to come upwards. But when you have a surge of 12 or 14 feet, it doesn't matter what you have below it. That water's coming in. So that's why they built that large barrier around the east side of New Orleans. But the Mr. Go was closed with the rock wall. And honestly, what you see in there is a lot of stormwater retention north of there, or I guess west of there. And some of those wetlands are really looking a lot better. Basically, a lot of the fresher water is being trapped on the interior. A lot of that saltier water is not coming out because of that closure. And you're seeing positive results in some of those wetlands up there. So I think it was a good thing to kind of close off that channel, which for the most part was largely unused from what I understand. So they were able to close that several years ago. But like I said, when you get a storm coming from the east with a surge of 10 or 12 feet, the water's coming over the channel, over whatever block you put at the mouth of Mr. Go and heading right in. So that surge barrier they built, if you ever get a chance to visit that thing, I'd highly recommend it. It's referred to as the Great Wall of St. Bernard Parish, or other names like that, but it is an impressive feature.
So it extends over the openings into the lake through the Wrigley and that area, or what?
Yeah, so it's actually where they call the Golden Triangle. It's where the Mr. Go from the south and another the Inner Harbor Channel from the north formed a funnel, and basically what they did was they built a wall to cut off that funnel. So it's quite a large wall. So it's basically directly due east of the city of New Orleans.
Well, it's impressive when you're driving over those new bridges on I-10 east of the city, how they raised them up because you go all through that Louisiana Mississippi coast. The hurricane didn't care about those bridges, did it?
They threw those bridge piers up like they were Legos.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I can share this or not, but Scott sent this over. That's a picture of the model. Can y'all see my screen share at this point?
Yep.
I see it. Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey,
talk about that picture for a second.
Okay, yeah, so Bill, while you're talking, I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt there, but I found an article from WBUR about your facility, and it has a number of pictures. So I use that. I'll put that in our show notes.
Excellent.
Yes.
So yeah, that picture that you just flashed up there, that is the model with the projectors on. So you see, obviously the room has been darkened and we have our projection system on. So you see basically a good radiant map of satellite imagery of the lower Mississippi River. You don't see a whole lot of water and sediment from this perspective, but one of the things you would see in the model in its normal day-to-day operations is it's just plain white. You see a whole lot of black sediment flowing on it. That's what we call the river sand on our model. And that's what we're testing. But this image is beautiful. I think this was taken by a professional photographer at LSU, and it really does capture the power of those projectors. And you see the second story observation deck with displays and interactives along the balcony there that kind of help explain everything in the model. Some of the same things I'm explaining to you guys here.
Yeah, that's the made for TV look right there, huh?
Yeah, that's a pretty good shot there.
That's really nice. Thanks, Scott, for sharing that. That was really cool. Now I don't know how to get my picture back, but there we go. We're coming up on the 61st anniversary of one of the deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history, Hurricane Audrey, 1957, I think. And you've done some restoration in Cameron Parish, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Talk about that project, and did Rita have anything to do with that?
Oh yeah, Rita. Holly Beach is the seaside community down in Lower Cameron Parish, and if you've seen some before and after pictures of that area, it's pretty devastating. I think one time I heard, I think the only remaining structure that stood was the water tower down there. So I mean, it's largely a camp community, fishing community, and basically it was completely wiped out. A lot of times that area is so low that there's not a whole lot you can do for a low-lying area like that's that close to the Gulf to protect them from a Category 3 or Category 4. What's interesting about that area is they lose their beaches, and there's not a constant supply of sediment along the coast to feed that beach. So we put a big beach project in there in 2013 to give them 300 feet of beach Gulfward. Honestly, their highway was just not even on a storm, just on a day-to-day south wind. The Gulf of Mexico was splashing on the highway. And if you lose that highway, you lose a hurricane evacuation route. You lose critical services. So we put a 300-foot wide beach in front of that highway to protect it. But at the end of the day, communities like Holly Beach, those people know the risk that they're at when they live down there. They're going to evacuate. I don't think anybody's going to try to ride out the storm living down there. What we try to do there is try to provide them a project that sustains their area, not so much for hurricanes, but for the wintertime cold front storms, just the normal stuff that we get on a day-to-day basis. And I think that beach project we put for them down there. We also, north of Holly Beach, north of the highway, was a large complex of degraded wetlands, a healthy marsh that basically Rita just ripped it out. I mean, it turned it from green grass to open water. So we've recently started building a whole lot of that marsh back. Louisiana's got what I like to call a tidal prism problem. Tide comes in, tide goes out. Our tides were not quite as what they used to be, what they are today, because water has a lot more space to go northward. So tides rip in, tides rip out. So if you get a breach in an island or a breach in the highway, all of a sudden that breach widens and deepens a lot quicker than what it used to back in the day when we had a lot more wetlands north of there, a lot smaller tidal prism. Our tidal prism has gotten exponentially higher over the years, and what we're trying to do is build back some of that inland marsh to try to solve that. So Cameron Parish is a tough situation until you get northward into Lake Charles, where there's actually a solid soils to start building levees on. You don't have a whole lot of things you can do for some of those communities out there. We build a lot of local projects, but at the end of the day, they're pretty low and pretty flat out in Cameron Parish.
Well, let's hope we go several years without having another hurricane on the Louisiana coast, but it's always just one season away for sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned running computer programs, and now you've got a physical model. Have you seen some nice correlations, or have you learned some things maybe that the computer models weren't picking up on from your physical model?
Yeah, so what we did is we haven't really got into testing diversions just quite yet. We're just commissioning the model here. But what we did run was the Bonnie Carey Spillway. And if you're not familiar with the Bonnie Carey, it is a structure that's north of the city of New Orleans, and it was just opened a couple months ago. When the river's in flood stage, they open up these gates and basically bleed energy off the river, flowing it into Lake Pontchartrain. So our model has the Bonnie Carey Spillway open, has the Bonnie Carey Spillway on it. So what we did is there's a lot of existing data. Every Bonnie Carey Spillway open, and people are studying the river, basically the scour and accretion zones in the river caused by the Bonnie Carey opening. So what we did is we ran our model for the 2011 event, which was a major flood here in Louisiana, and compared the physical model results to some of the numerical model results and the field data collection results. And we got a great matchup there with that data. And we were very pleased with the results that we had. Everything was kind of looking the same there in terms of where the river was scouring and where it was accreting upstream and downstream of the Bonnie Carey Spillway. So that was one check that we did, kind of an initial validation, because we knew we had a lot of data from the Bonnie Carey Spillway. So that we're very pleased with those results. And as we move forward, we'll start getting into some of the sediment diversions and comparing that to some of the computer model runs that we have.
Hey, Rudy, I want to change directions for just a second. For the city of New Orleans, was Hurricane Katrina more of a natural disaster or more of an engineering failure?
That's a pretty good question there. I'm going to be careful how I answer that one, but
you have to work with the core, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, we're just talking between us people here. No, you go ahead. Shoot straight.
No, I think it's. I mean, I'm going to give the cheap answer here, and I'd probably say it's both, right? I mean, obviously, it was a natural disaster, and I think a lot of the flooding and a lot of the rainwater that came down after that, during and after that storm, was definitely a major event. There's no denying. I mean, I'm an ASCE guy. I've been ASCE for since 1998. ASCE, several other professional organizations. Released well-documented studies on the engineering failures in some of those levees in and around New Orleans. So I do think there was you call them engineering failures, maybe policy failures as well, because I think a lot of times, the Corps of Engineers kind of has to build what the policymakers have them build. So, at the end of the day, I do think it's probably a combination of all of the above. But I'll kind of take the cheap answer and say both, because I do think there was some man or engineer failures in terms of those levees, the overtopping, the scour that happened behind them. So basically, what was happening is water came over the levees and scoured the protected side, then undermined the whole thing, and then the water breached through. Honestly, that was an engineering failure, and had that not been analyzed properly, perhaps it could have been prevented. So, I think there's definitely well documented reports on some of the engineering failures that took place with some of those flood protection systems and some of the areas you may have heard of, like the 17th Street Canal levees and things like that.
So if you could turn the clock back 30, 40, 50 years, what changes would you have made in the protection system to mitigate that from happening?
Well, I mean, I think if, I think one thing that, and I'm once again, I'm not an expert in this field, but I do know that a lot of the levees and walls that were built in those areas are what they refer to as eye walls, which is just basically a concrete wall embedded in earth. One of the features that the Corps has actually improved the system on is they've gone to a T-wall, which is basically an inverted T. So basically you embed an upside down T into the earth. And what that does is gives that wall stability. So when you look at some of the walls that failed in and around New Orleans post-Katrina, they were eye walls and there was no stability, and they were able to just topple over from the hydrostatic forces and other geotechnical failures. The T-walls do have a lot of stability within them, and I think the Corps of Engineers acknowledged that and actually improved a lot of those systems by putting those more robust, stable walls there in place. So you see that now in a lot of places around New Orleans. At the end of the day, I think you got to look at it from a standpoint of New Orleans needs to be protected. It needs to have levees around it. But at the end of the day, when there was a healthy ecosystem and a healthy system of wetlands around New Orleans and Houma and other these areas, these storms didn't cause as much damage. And that's well documented, that when you have the wetlands protect the levees. So that's one of the things we're looking at now is you have a levee system. They built it. What can we do to protect the levees? We're trying to build as much wetland buffer around the system as we can. I do think that's something that we need to maybe take a little more seriously. And the Corps has even started implementing a lot of ecosystem restoration projects as well, because there's parts of Louisiana you just can't build tall levees and big walls on, because it'll basically sink immediately. So that you live in a very wetland dominated environment. You have to take advantage of that.
Some say that the city of New Orleans has not seen the worst case scenario. What say you?
I think what happened at Katrina was pretty close to it. A lot of the areas that you say didn't get the major flood damage, they're higher, and it makes sense. They're closer to the river, which is the highest land in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, or any of these cities. So perhaps worst case scenario. We always joke a little bit about this because sometimes you do get a high river that could kind of coincide with hurricane season. So a lot of times these high river events kind of will go into June and perhaps July. So perhaps the worst case scenario would be a river levee failure and a hurricane levee failure where you get flooded from both sides there. That would be pretty devastating for a city in New Orleans to get a river levee failure as well as a hurricane levee failure. But I think that's very unlikely given the time of year that those events happen. But without putting too much thought in, and I think Katrina was probably as close to a worst case scenario as you can get. and just the way that things transpired and the failures that took place and when they took place.
And you mentioned earlier, half the battle is working with politicians. Do you think local politicians, those in local and state governments there, understand these issues that you talked about in the show tonight?
I think so. I think I think they understand the issues in their districts that are important to their constituencies. What we always try to say as CPRA is we need to look at it as a system, and I think that's where it gets difficult because everybody, a lot of the policymakers have a tendency to go back to who they're elected by, and I'm not pointing the finger, and I don't think that's a negative thing, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of times it's systematic. But I do think more so than ever, I think our politics are coming in the line. Louisiana is very much a political state, just like any others. But I think there's one thing that all politicians, no matter which side of the aisle they land on, can agree on, is that flood protection and coastal restoration are a priority in our state. So I think our agencies kind of increase the message we send. I think bringing people to the facilities like the Center for River Studies is eye-opening to some, but I do think in our state that is one thing everybody sees eye to eye on, is the need to do something in terms of flood protection and coastal restoration.
Awesome. So, Rudy, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, you got any social media accounts? What's the best way to do that? Because often people that listen want to ask questions or email you. So, or what's the best way to do that?
I think the best thing to do is just hit right to our website, coastal.la.gov, just as I said it there. I think all of our social media links, we have a whole little homepage dedicated to the Center for River Studies. We have a whole little kind of separate page dedicated to sediment diversions on there. So if you go right to the homepage, it's right there in the front. We put all the important stuff right there on the front page. So that's coastal.la.gov is our homepage there, and you can get all the latest and greatest information. You can see where our public meetings happen. We do a lot of public outreach, particularly in areas needing sediment diversions. We hit the ground running and go out and meet with the residents. And you could also see how you get some information on visiting the Center for River Studies. I did say that it's generally confined to school groups. We have let a lot of technical organizations, scientists, engineering groups come as well. So if there's a group of people are interested in visiting, please let us know, and we'll try to make it happen.
How often do
that link will be in the show notes too?
Awesome. But how often do these public meetings that you talked about, are those done fairly often?
We try to visit with the residents of Plaquemines Parish at least once a month. We've been down there over the past year and a half. I think we've been down there almost 24 times, and we've kind of cranked it up recently. Of course, now the projects are starting to be designed. So I think someone put a figure out there. I think in the past 2 years we've traveled over 9,000 miles back and forth. Plaquemines Parish is quite a haul from Baton Rouge, so we've definitely done some traveling. But we want to educate the people who live in those areas and give them the facts on the project. Just as any project that comes along, people have a tendency to view the project as perhaps a bad thing or not doing what the government is selling it to do. So we go down there and it's really informal. We have face-to-face meetings with people. It's kind of a storefront setup. We pick a table in a council meeting room, and people come visit us and ask us questions. A lot of times people have a tendency to be a little more open to discussion when they're in a more intimate setting than at a public meeting with 50 or 100 people that are yelling at you. So, we like it because people have a tendency to calm down and just ask the questions. Although people do get passionate from time to time. But I do think overall it's a good thing. I think we're giving people the best information, being 100% transparent. We're not hiding from anything here, and we give them the project whether they like it or not. This is what it's going to do, and this is how we're going to build it.
So
Awesome.
are there still hurt feelings from 1927 in some of those places in southern Louisiana, Rudy?
I think so. I mean, a lot of parts in and around the city of New Orleans. There's a historic site known as Carnarvon, which is on the opposite bank of the river. If you ever read the book Rising Tide, which once again I highly recommend you do if you haven't, they blew a levee on the opposite side of the river of New Orleans to keep New Orleans from flooding. Obviously, a lot of those residents in that area probably still remember that and things like that. So at the end of the day, I think, I can't speak for the residents that live in the surrounding parishes, but New Orleans is the hub of our state. economic wise, tourism wise. So I think if people have an appreciation for that. But you know, the parishes south and around New Orleans are unique. It's fishing communities, very passionate people who have been living there a long time, who know the area. So we like to learn a lot from them, but also understand, you know, we hope that they can accept this project and the benefit that it will provide for them long term. Because that's kind of our goal here is these river diversions are our best opportunity for long term sustainability on this part of our state.
So the final and most important question here, how's the LSU football team looking for the fall?
If you'd have opened up with that one, I might have just hung up on y'all. But I guess I think we're going to continue to do some good things. I mean, I think Ed Orgeron's, you know, maybe taking a play out of Nick Saban's book, and he's dedicated to building the offensive line and building the defensive line. And we're going to have a couple down years, but I do think the defensive line, offensive line are going to be amongst the best in the SEC, and he's going to build his team around those. We'll see how the rest of the positions play out over time, and whether or not us LSU fans can patiently give him the time he needs to build a program. So, you know, at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think we're going to have some good seasons. Or we're going to have great seasons where we're winning national championships or contending for them year in, year out. You know, unfortunately, only the folks in Tuscaloosa can wave that banner right now. So we'll see what we can do about that.
Awesome. Well, Rudy, you've given us more than an hour of your time. It was great having you on the show. A great guest, great information, and thanks for your work. It's very important, and we appreciate what you're doing and hope you come back soon.
I appreciate it. And anytime you guys want an update or want some more information, let us know. We're happy to join in. And like I said, shoot us an email if you have a group of people that want to come down and see the center. We're going to do our best to get y'all in there.
Awesome. Rudy, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rudy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rudy. All right, thanks a lot. We're going to take a quick break at this point. We're going to do Professor Peters. We have Tony Rice, and there's Aubrey. Aubrey, you want to do the email now, or you want to wait 5 minutes? You got 5 minutes?
I'll take 5 minutes.
Okay, good deal. Let's take a quick break, and we will be right back as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
While preparing the Weather Extreme video for the blog, I drew attention to the GFS forecast of a negatively tilted trough for early next week. Now, when you read forecast discussions, you often see references to troughs and occasionally a reference to a negatively tilted trough. So just what does that mean? Well, first off, when a trough is positively tilted or neutrally tilted, it usually has no reference as such. Instead, you just see it referenced as a trough. But when it goes negatively tilted, you usually see it referenced as such. The tilt of a trough is the angle the trough axis makes with lines of longitude. A negatively tilted trough tilts horizontally from the northwest to the southeast. So what is the big deal about having a negative tilt to a trough and making note of it in a forecast discussion? A negatively tilted trough usually points to several important characteristics about what is happening in the weather. A negatively tilted trough generally indicates a low pressure system that has reached maturity. It also indicates strong differential advection or middle and upper level cool air advecting over low level warm advection. This characteristic amplifies thermodynamic instability, and a negative tilt to the trough also means good vertical wind shear. The combination of a deep low-pressure system at the surface, a negatively tilted trough aloft, and a warm, moist, warm sector east of the Rockies often produces a severe weather outbreak. So what leads to the negative tilt of the trough? Well, there are a number of factors, but perhaps the leading elements are strong middle and upper level winds wrapping around the base of the trough, a strong jet near the base of the trough, a ridge to the east of the trough, and the occlusion of the low pressure system. So the next time you see the model projection showing a negatively tilted trough, or note that term in a forecast discussion, you can be fairly certain that an intense storm system will be the result. Got a weather question? Drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
This is a good time to look for Jupiter. From our perspective here on Earth, Jupiter and the Sun will be exactly opposite each other at 8:39 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, Tuesday, May 8th. You can look for the King of Planets in the constellation Lyra. Now, you may have heard Jupiter being described this week as full, like the moon. While opposition does make for a geometry where it appears its biggest and brightest, and it will rise opposite the setting sun. Not unlike how the full moon rises at sunset, Jupiter pretty much always appears full to us. In fact, the superior planets, or those further from the sun than the Earth, don't exhibit the full range of phases that the inferior planets do. Think about it. Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune always appear about 99% illuminated. The only superior planet that appears anything less than that is Mars, which is quite a bit closer. It last appeared 83% full in 2005. This won't happen again until 2037. It's Mercury, Venus, plus the Moon, the inferior planets, that go through that full range of phases, from new to full and back to new again. All this aside, though, do take a look at Jupiter. It's very easy to spot throughout the week, and actually throughout the rest of May into June. Right now, the Juno spacecraft is actively studying the planet. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Well. I got a funny feeling we might have a little email this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
We've got some emails. And is my video flashing? I think.
Nope, looks
think,
clean as a whistle.
Nope.
Here. Looks great.
Okay. All right. I have a feeling that we may have to get a new camera, but we'll see. All right. David Nunez sent us a little ditty. It is more of a comic, a meteorologist comic, which is really cool. I'm sure we can post that, Brian. That one came in, unless it was posted last week. But we can. It's a little too technical to actually read on here, but thank you for sending that in, David. And Tarmo had sent us a message about a Guardian article about social meteorologists pushing Egypt over the edge, and Egypt is going to crack down on fake weather reports. So the Egyptian Meteorological Authority says that it is the only government body authorized to make predictions about the country's weather and is preparing a draft law to ban unauthorized forecasts. So that was very interesting. So we appreciate that, Tarmo. And Chris Tate sent us a note saying that he appreciates the work we do, including WeatherBrains, and apparently got to meet Brian at the end of the end of April. Yep.
At the Barber Motorsports Honda Indy Grand Prix of Alabama. He was the EMA representative
say that again,
out there.
Backwards.
Yeah. No, I can't. Whether I'm sober or drunk, I can't do it. Either way.
What?
All right, so that's pretty cool. And Richard Cook sent us a note, just an email to say, glad we mentioned on the show last time, this would have been the end of April, about episode 275. I listened to it for the first time today, forgetting it was the actual anniversary until I listened. I'm assuming this was the tornado outbreak 2011. Very worthwhile listening, and just keep up the great work. It was also very hard, but nice to hear JB again. So I think that's all I have. So if you have an email for us, email at weatherbrains.com. Love to hear maybe some guest suggestions. And Bill loves when you send that contact information. So maybe an email or even social media, contact information on a guest suggestion, maybe a show suggestion you have, what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, a cool topic that you want us to discuss. We'll think about it, and then we'll get back to you. Email at weatherbrains.com.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Doing the show on May 7th, 2018. This is the Weather Roundup. We kind of talk about what's happening and what's to come. We've already briefly discussed with Rick Smith of the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. You had little action last week for the first time in a while.
We did. May 2nd, last Wednesday, we had some severe weather, tornado watch for much of the area, and we had some supercell storms out in western Oklahoma early in the event, and about the time they got to Interstate 35, kind of transitioned to more of a QLCS thing. So we had we're still counting tornadoes. I think the strongest one we had was an EF2 out in southwest Oklahoma. We did have a 8-mile long EF1 track through Norman here. So this makes, I think, the 5th consecutive year that Norman's had a tornado within a city limits. So,
and it missed now, Chuck Doswell.
It nearly missed a lot of people. A lot of people live over on the east side over there, and it was close to lots of people's houses. Fortunately, it was very weak. The EF1 was just one house that had some roof damage. So,
yeah,
very fortunate.
But that you talked about the warnings being very timely and very well done. It seemed like leading up to the event, it was pretty well forecast by everybody. It seemed that
I think so. Yeah. I mean, well, people had been talking about it it felt like by the time we got there, we had been talking about it for a month. You know, you're one of those things, you're exhausted before it ever starts. But yeah, it was well forecast. SPC did a really good job. They moved the moderate risk around and increased tornado potential. And overall, it was a very, very successful event, I think.
And of course, some of the hyperbole just comes with the territory. I mean, that's you can't control what people say, but the actual forecast products I thought were just excellent.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, that's just part of it is the extra sauce that gets put on there. But it was, you know, I don't think we're done. I think, you know, we're kind of having a lull now. It's a brief taste of summer here, but I think maybe in the next, I don't know, before the end of May, we're not done with severe weather yet, I don't think.
And it just seems to me, Rick, that you do a very good job of calming people down through the social media platforms that you use, not only personally, but you know, the Weather Service in Norman, you know, discussing that this is May, this stuff happens here, this is nothing unprecedented, this is nothing unusual, and that calm voice just seems to be very important in this day and age.
We try hard. I mean, we try to be the voice of calm and reason, and even with social media these days, there's even more of a need for that. So, you know, we just try to tell the facts. We may not be as exciting or you know, our job is just to tell people what's going to happen in as calm a way as possible without scaring people. If we need to scare people, you know, we will do that in a responsible way. But I mean, we never want to scare people. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
You gotta hold something back for when you really, really need to yell loud. So that's what we try to do.
Very good. Aubrey, how warm is it in Harrisonburg this evening?
It is 65 out right now. It was a very beautiful 73 degrees today. It was the dew point was like 46. It was like one of those picture perfect days. It was gorgeous. I was out driving around the county today and on a school visit, and I took some great pictures, and it was just a stunning, stunning day. And I wish I could have called in sick today.
When do you normally hit 90, or does your average high ever hit 90 there in the summer?
Oh yes, we hit 90. We actually hit 90 last week, which is so we hit it on May 4th. So we hit it on Friday, which is a month earlier than average. Average is June 4th. We average about 20 to 22 days at 90 or above each year. And it has been since 2012 since we hit 100. So we've kind of been in the 94, 95 max territory the last couple of years. So upper 90s are not very typical. Lower 93, 94 is, you know, typical.
Okay. So Brian Peters down here in Dixie Alley. Are we done with tornadoes for the season, for the spring? Is the death ridge set in?
You know,
that's a show title right there. Spell that.
There's entirely too much of May left. Mm-hmm. This is May 7th.
Mm-hmm. A couple systems on the map too.
Yeah, this is entirely too early. Our severe weather season's March, April, and May. And, you know, it's just too early to say May is completely over with for severe weather.
And we've got our first bogus GFS tropical storm or hurricane.
I saw that.
Oh, yeah.
Coming into Cuba on the 23rd. So
yeah, I saw something over the weekend, and I didn't even mention it. I wasn't going to give it that benefit. Yeah. But, you know, I don't think Birmingham has hit 90 yet, James.
No, we haven't. Aubrey
okay.
Beat.
So I beat you guys to 90?
Yeah.
You did.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're the winner.
I thought that was true.
You You sent us some backdoor cold front to keep us under, man. So you could beat us to the punch there, Aubrey.
Don't make me mad. I'll send you a wedge.
Hey, we love those wedges, by the way.
Little sister's giving us wedgies, guys.
Oh, brother, this is going right down the tube. So Brian, do you have any concern about drought for the summer?
I do, because this the system that came through Saturday, James. It lingered out there to the west for a long time and gave those folks, along the Mississippi-Alabama line, it gave them a nice dousing. But here at my house, the shower missed me. I didn't get a drop.
Yeah,
so yes, I am concerned that we've gone the entire week of May and I haven't had any precipitation to record, and I don't think Birmingham did either, although I don't know exactly how much fell. Let's see. Yeah, they recorded a trace on the weekend on Saturday. So yes, drought is a real concern.
Well, I saw some modeling out into the summer, though, that looks like we might be a little warmer than normal and a little wetter than normal. So I'll take that.
I'm okay for the wetter because I don't like drought. And right now, most of Alabama is in pretty good shape, although the southeast is a little bit drier, the southeast section of Alabama. But yes, I think droughts are a very real concern.
I don't like the way it looks. I don't like it. But let's move on.
Yeah, because soil temperatures and moisture become a part of the problem, and we're not doing really well here at the start.
Methinks this summer might be hot and dry down here, but that's just a thought.
I think it's going to be a hot summer. I don't know. I feel like it's Murphy's Law, with winter kind of hanging on later. I feel like that's going to transfer into a extremely hot summer. I don't know. It's just kind of one of those.
There's only one fly in the ointment down here. I've scheduled a cruise for
that's when the hurricane's coming.
Hurricane season. So,
and when is this cruise?
I refuse to answer.
I'm going to guess October.
I'm going to plead. No, it's much earlier than that. It's in June.
Oh, it's going to be that party that Bill Murray's throwing up there in St. Louis. That's when the big hurricane's going to blow.
August 25th.
Right?
that is the peak. I mean, almost right at the peak of the hurricane season. I mean, that in the last time we tried to go to St. Louis, when was that? Was it last year for the AMS thing? And we had a tropical system and nobody could go. So I don't know. We'll try it again.
Well, at least if we have a hot summer, though, James, at least we'll get to hear Matthew Selly's heat tips quite frequently.
Oh, I can't wait to heat emergency. Yes. So let's do picks of the week. Let's go around the horn. Everybody shares something that is weather related. I bet you Rick Smith has a pick of the week.
I think I got a really cool pick of the week. I can't remember which Sunday it aired, but CBS Sunday Morning did over a 5-minute piece on the NOAA P3, the hurricane hunters that are flying kind of. Is it part of Vortex Southeast? I'm not sure, but they flying some research scientists that work in my building. In and around some supercell storms, and just a really cool flight that they caught. And they caught a supercell over Louisiana, and you can see the wall cloud. They actually reported the tornado from the plane, which is kind of unusual in an LSR, I think, to have a source of the report from an airplane. But they're flying at like 2,700 feet. It's just very cool. It's a cool story, and I think the researchers got some really good data. So this will be one. Whether you're at AMS or NWA, probably won't make NWA, but AMS and beyond that, you'll be hearing about this for a while.
Yeah, one of those. There's no box for that.
Right, exactly.
But some of the flight track looked like the spaghetti I had for dinner tonight. That's what was interesting to me.
But to see a C-130 flying around a supercell thunderstorm at like 2,500 feet, I mean, that is just a bizarre scene to see, and many people have noticed it, especially back on March 19th, the tornado day we had here. And don't you know that pilot's got to be good? I mean, wow, that's a challenge. All right, but that's a great pick, Rick. Mine, it's hurricane season is almost here, and the Hurricane Center has a really nice glossary of all the terms they use. And even for those of us that have been doing this forever, there's some stuff that occasionally they say that we might not understand. That glossary has a definition for everything that they use. So that'll be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Mr. Peters, what is your pick of the week, sir?
I'm going to go with your theme. I was reading through some of the NHC information, and I noted they put out a release about product changes for 2018. And while some of these are pretty minor, I think it's a nice way to kind of get your mind thinking back about hurricane season. And by the way, we are in Hurricane Awareness Week in the United States is this week. But it's a NHC product changes for 2018.
Okay. And again, that'll be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Aubrey, what you got for us?
NCWeb got a facelift. The fire reporting site. So it's kind of cool. You can zoom in. It's a little more interactive. Has some fire information on there of these different fire events going on across the country. And yeah, I like it. It's a little more interactive and it looks nice and sharp since we had a fire here this weekend.
Very nice. All right, Bill, pick of the week and future guests to come.
Yeah, I actually have a pick of the week, James. You don't get to use the fog this week, so I'm excited about that. But my pick of the week is about fog. So we've been talking about hurricanes and all kind of tornadoes tonight. So I'm going to pick a nice simple fog. You've heard of it.
you get the foghorn anyway.
I wonder where he got the idea.
I heard that word. I just
there we go. So it's the GeoCat, the Geostationary Cloud Algorithm Test Bed at the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies at Wisconsin. Outstanding fog detection algorithms in there where they use mathematical algorithms on the GO16 data, and it was an absolute champ this past weekend, post-frontal, as we had dense fog form over western Tennessee, northern Mississippi, into northwest Alabama. It was just outstanding, and it correlated beautifully to what was being seen on the ground. So I want to thank Scott Martin for putting the show together tonight. Scott, that was a great job. I really enjoyed talking to Rudy. That was a good talk. We have the author of the book from the AMS book series, about the life and work of Werner Sumi, one of the satellite pioneers. John Lewis will join us next Monday night. And
Yay,
Aubrey,
we got him.
Aubrey is responsible for that show. We're going to do a joint show on the 21st with Tim Vasquez. Y'all know him from Weather Graphics. You know, he does a really awesome 30-minute analysis show every night. And so, Rick, we're not really hoping for severe weather, but we wouldn't mind having some active weather that night. Maybe somewhere in the old bread basket so we can all kind of analyze it together. And it looks like things might be coming together for that. Now, I'm really excited about the 29th and the 4th because we're going to gear up for hurricane season with Max Mayfield and Brian Norcross on the 29th. And then we're going to have the new director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham, on June the 4th. And so that's going to be a blast. And we'll go from real science to fake science. No, never mind. Well, anyway, with the Farmer's Almanac and Peter Geiger, who's the editor of that, on June the 11th. So that'll be a fun show on June 11th. Then we'll come back with Phil Klotz back on the 18th, talk a little more hurricanes. And we just got an outstanding lineup all the way through July now here on WeatherBrains.
The guest booking officer on this show is the best, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, I got to go do some television. WeatherBrains is typically on the air Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Some people watch us live on the video side. That's live.bigbrainsmedia.com. We know most of you listen to the podcast version, so thanks for doing that either way. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it's email@weatherbrains.com. If you use that one, we all see it. And our social media accounts are on the website as well, weatherbrains.com. Give us a follow if you want to. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a marvelous weekend. God bless.
So James, have you noticed Snapchat losing some viewers since they changed over their format? Now they've changed it back.
Well, they changed it back?
Yeah, they changed it back recently because apparently they were losing users right and left. So it looks like
that's a struggling little platform. They shook the boat with that, and it just sometimes you don't need to shake the boat. Don't fix something that ain't broke. You know
exactly.
Good advice. Right. Absolutely good advice.
All right, guys, we're out. We'll see you.